What's going on, guys? Luke22SV here, and today I'm here with a video ranking the 2019 F1 drivers from worst to best. I did a video like this at the start of the season, but now after the entire season's finished now, a bit late as well, this video, but after the season has finished, we've decided to rank these drivers from worst to best, seeing how they changed from my my rankings from the start of the season until now, who's moved up, who's moved down. So without further ado, let's get on straight into the video. Just in the background playing at the moment is just me getting used to my wheel at the moment. I've recently bought no traction control either, so just carry on watching that whilst you're listening to me. And well, starting off with number 20, we've got Robert Kubica. I'm not really sure this would be a surprise for many, seeing him ranked last out of the 20 drivers. A really difficult season for him in the struggling Williams team, getting out-qualified in every single race by George Russell, a rookie teammate. Doesn't really look good on him, despite everything that's happened and everything he's been through to get back into Formula 1. Just wasn't the same Robert Kubica we saw all those years ago, driving for BMW and Renault and just putting it on the podiums and stuff like that. So it was a shame to see him struggle so badly and being so far off the pace, really, of his teammate. But he did manage to get a point on his comeback, which Russell wasn't able to do, although a bit fortunate. Now moving on to number 19, and well, that will be Robert Kubica was previously P16, but now moving on to number 19, which is Romain Grosjean. Not too surprised, I'm sure people will be by hearing Grosjean far down the order as well. A really poor season from Grosjean, putting it more in the wall than in the points, if anything. But yeah, a really difficult season for the car as well. Not the greatest car, but of course, I don't know how he's still in F1 next year when Hulkenberg isn't. So somehow Grosjean's managed to keep his seat in F1 2020. If he can improve, we'll all have to hope that he somehow has a good season like he did back in 2013. But that feels like so long ago, seeing Grosjean perform. Which was just not used to seeing that at the moment. He's really causing more problems for other drivers than anything else, really. Now moving on to 18th place, we've got Lance Stroll, in the Racing Point for the first time after leaving Williams, giving him a midfield car. But with that midfield car, he's struggled to get out of Q1 so many times this season compared to Sergio Perez, who's got into Q3. Quite a few times, and the points difference between himself and Perez as well, quite a big difference, despite Stroll's 4th place at Germany. So Stroll not really showing his talent at the moment, more showing his cash. But yeah, Stroll has got room for improvement. I do believe that Stroll can become a good driver, but at the moment he's a long way off Sergio Perez. But Sergio Perez is a good driver at the same time, but we just haven't seen anything from Stroll that really gets you excited about him for the future. But he was previously 14th, just behind Grosjean, who was 13th actually from the last time. So we're going to 17th now, which is going to be Antonio Giovinazzi, who started the season off really struggling, but now into the recent few races, he actually managed to pick up a lot more points, started to out-qualify Kimi Räikkönen a little bit. So Giovinazzi, almost surprised that he was still on the grid for next season, but his second half of the season was really strong actually. So it was good to see him actually stay on the grid for another season, because we want to see these younger talents doing well. But Giovinazzi, a strong second half of the season is probably why he's still in F1 next year. And yeah, he was in 17th last at the start of the season as well, just ahead of the 3 rookies. He had 2 races prior to this season, and now he's had his first full season. I'm sure he'll probably challenge Raikkonen a lot more in 2020. But now moving on to 16th place, which is Kevin Magnussen, and the second Haas driver already in the bottom 5, which just shows that the Haas drivers haven't really been too good this season. Magnussen's been a lot better than Grosjean, but that's really as far much as you can say about Kevin Magnussen. Hasn't really been as good as a driver as I'd expect him to be this season. Had a good season in 2018, but 2019 perhaps more down to the car, but has been out-qualified a bit by Grosjean as well, although I think he did beat him in the out-qualifying and of course outscoring him, but not by much. That would really warrant him being further up the order, and a difficult season for Magnussen with that car not really doing as well as it could have. But he was 10th, so he's gone down 6 places since the start of the season. So that really shows how much of a difficult season he's had. And now moving on to 15th place, which is Danny Kvyat. A good first half of the season for Toro Rosso. He managed to get that podium in Germany, a very good result that day. But again, sort of really been outshone by both Albon and Gasly when they were both teammates. Gasly did really well when he came into Toro Rosso compared to Danny Kvyat, who didn't really do too much against Pierre Gasly. And Albon as well did quite well against Danny Kvyat as well. So Kvyat, a solid season, but I don't know. They're probably the weakest of the Red Bull drivers now that we've seen Gasly in the Toro Rosso alongside him, and Albon move up to the Red Bull. But he was also 15th, so both Giovinazzi and Danny Kvyat stayed in their places from the start of the season. But now we move on to 14th place, which is going to be Pierre Gasly, who's moved down 3 places from the start of the season. Despite his second place in the Toro Rosso in Brazil, it was that part of the Red Bull, that part time in the Red Bull that he had at the start of the season, which really has not helped him at all this season. Getting lapped in Austria, finishing behind the McLarens in a few races. It's really not looked good on him. But he's looked about as quick in the Red Bull as he did in the Toro Rosso, because he's been quite strong in the Toro Rosso, which is just weird to see, really. How can you be so poor in the Red Bull but so good in the Toro Rosso? Hopefully in the future, if he gets another chance in the Red Bull, which I'm not sure he will, he can do a lot better in that Red Bull. Maybe, I don't know what the issue was, whether that car didn't suit him, but to be that far off of Verstappen, Albon did a lot better really in the Red Bull. It's just strange to see him do so, but I didn't really think much of him at the start of the season either, so I guess that's one of my predictions I got right. He was 11th at the start of the season. He's gone down 3 to 14th. So moving to 13th then, I've gone for Kimi Räikkönen, and he was originally 7th at the start of the season, but now down to 13th. I think Räikkönen had a good first half of the season, doing very well, probably one of the best of the midfield bunch. But towards the second half of the season, I think age and perhaps age is catching up to him now. And maybe his last season will probably be next season at the end of his 2-year deal. I can't see him staying beyond that when there's a lot of Ferrari juniors coming up as well. So Räikkönen perhaps heading towards the end of the career. Did a very good job at the start of the season, getting a lot of Alfa Romeo's points. Still their best point scorer, of course, by some way in the end. In front of Giovinazzi, but towards the second half of the season, he really struggled to score points, getting out-qualified by Giovinazzi, and I think now age is really starting to catch up with Räikkönen, and he might not even last the whole of next season, but I don't know, that might just be me being throwing a crazy prediction out there, but I don't know. Seeing him down in 13th, I think that's about right for him at the moment. He's starting to lose it a little bit now, but down from 7th then. But moving on to 12th, we have Alexander Albon. A strong season, a strong debut season from Albon. Of course, it's only his second season. I can't really put him up too high, but hasn't really been too close to Verstappen yet. Maybe in next season we'll start to see him push on more, but hasn't really been too strong in the Red Bull. Has been okay, I guess, but Verstappen on another level really compared to him. But we could have seen perhaps if the second Red Bull driver was a little bit stronger, they could have challenged Ferrari and beaten them in the constructors. But it's just really a one-man show in the Red Bull throughout the whole season, despite having the driver changes. But perhaps giving him a start of the season in the Red Bull, only a second season, I think we could see a lot better from Albon in season 2 of his career. But again, it's a bit iffy with him and Gasly. Whether they'll be able to perform next season remains to be seen. But I'm not really sure what to expect from those guys yet. But he was, of course, down in the bottom 3 with the other rookies of Norris and Russell. So moving on to another rookie, which will be Lando Norris, who I put into 11th. Of course, he was down in the bottom 3 at the start of the season. But yeah, I've put him in 11th. A strong first season for Lando Norris, a very good season in the McLaren, the 4th best car on the grid. Sainz got a lot more points than him, but again, Lando Norris had so many difficulties with the engines and stuff like that. Just having a lot of reliability problems throughout the season. Perhaps could have got a lot more points than what's shown on the driver standings. But yeah, a very strong season from Lando Norris, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more. The British talent's looking promising for the future, that's for sure. But yeah, now we move on to 10th place, which I've gone for Nico Hülkenberg. the man that's been dropped by Renault for next season, and the man who's just struggled a little bit this season as well, being outperformed by Daniel Ricciardo. So in that sense, I can see why perhaps Renault have gone for a different driver in Esteban Ocon, but Hulkenberg's done so well for Renault in the past and done a reasonable job this season. It's definitely been Renault's best lineup so far. Of course, Ocon being a French driver and a young driver, it would make sense for them to put Ocon in the Renault, but it's really sad to see Hulkenberg go. He's dropped from 5th though to 10th after a little bit of a difficult season. Not really shown much as he did in 2018 where he was best of the rest. Unfortunately, Daniel Ricciardo sort of put him in his place a little bit in terms of qualifying and sort of races as well. Reliability, and the car hasn't been as good as it was last year, so we haven't perhaps seen what Hulkenberg could do. Of course, in Germany, he could have got a podium that day, but frustratingly binned it, on the drag strip. So it could be so much more from Hulkenberg, but that's the story of his career, really. Hopefully, we'll see him back in 2021, but I'm not sure whether we will. But now moving on to number 9, our highest rookie, which is George Russell. Maybe a surprise for some of them that I put George Russell up here so high, despite not scoring any points this season, which obviously would look quite bad. But what he's done in his debut season in the Williams has almost gone unnoticed. I think he's been fantastic all season. Had a really good debut season, qualifying Kubica in every single race. Actually, in a few races, being able to qualify the midfield cars, being amongst the midfield in a few of the races as well. Really having a very strong season, very good pace in a car that's not been very good. And it can't be easy to come into a car that's so bad in his first season. And if Williams can get a slightly better car next season, we could see Russell show more of his potential now. He's got a bit more experience, tracks he's not been to before. So George Russell really promising for the future. I think in 2021 he could well be within a shout for a Mercedes seat. But yeah, and of course he was down in the bottom 3 to start off with. But now moving on to 8th place, this was where it starts to get difficult. I've gone for Valtteri Bottas, maybe a little bit low for what people expect. He's gone up 1 from P9 at the start of the season, but a good season and probably his best season in the Mercedes team so far. But again, in the second half of the season, around, sort of the mid part of the season, he dropped off the championship fight. But we're expecting Valtteri Bottas to come back even stronger in 2020. Can he actually fight Lewis for a title? He really needs to show that he can now, because he's just looking too much like a number 2 driver and more not like a number 1 driver like Hamilton is. But can he fight for the title in 2020? That's what we want to see from Bottas, more killer instinct. But he's gone up 1 though. But moving on to 7, and Ricciardo, who's gone down from 3rd down to 7th, and a difficult one as well. But hasn't really stood out to me too much this season, despite being in a Renault that's not very quick. Hasn't really stood out too much compared to other drivers that have. So that's the only decision there, really. That's put Ricciardo down to 7th. Still a very good season, though, in his first at Renault. If Renault can have a better car next season, which I'm sure they will, Ricciardo can get on the podium, I think, for Renault, can get their first podium in Formula 1, since rejoining as a constructor. But difficult decision, put him from 3rd down to 7th in a car that's just struggled all season. But now we move on to 6th, and I've gone for Sergio Perez. Another great season from Sergio Perez. He also seems to go quite unnoticed, but in the Racing Point, it hasn't been the best. Of course, they had pretty much the Force India problems last season. Hasn't really managed to get the much development to start the season for this car. But Sergio Perez has dragged many points out of the car and actually managed to do so well for the team. Again, getting into the top 10, and really deserves to be in a top team, to be honest. Again, Sergio Perez, probably one of the best drivers in Formula 1. But again, at the moment, I've put him into 6th because he's just had such a good season again. And against the highly rated Ocon, highly rated Hulkenberg and Stroll, he's beaten them all. So, very good driver is Sergio Perez. But now moving on to our top 5. It's so difficult to put these in order, but for 5th, I've gone for Leclerc. Leclerc had a very good first season at Ferrari, but I just didn't know whether to put him ahead of Vettel, behind Vettel. But I think for the fact that Vettel is a 4-time world champion, it's just difficult for me to decide where to put Leclerc in front of him in that case. But Leclerc had a very good season at Ferrari, getting the 7 poles, I think it was, and of course the wins as well in Belgium and Italy, and well, doing very well on a difficult weekend that was in Belgium. And in front of the Tifosi in Italy as well. Had the issues with his teammate, of course, in Russia, Italy, and of course Brazil, the little incident which has sort of tarnished it a bit. Both drivers really at fault, to be honest, throughout the season. They've both been in a difficult season in terms of really just how bad the strategies are, how they have sort of both. When Leclerc is quicker, they sort of hold up Leclerc, but when Vettel is quicker, they hold up Vettel. It's been really bad strategies from Ferrari all season, and they sort of really need a good team around them to both perform, I think, in 2020. And of course, Leclerc was originally 8th at the start of the season, and Vettel was 2nd. He's gone down to 4th. Perez was 6th as well at the start of the season. So Perez sort of keeping his space there, which is sort of good prediction there, really, from me, but saying that he would be 6th, and he is still 6th best driver. So Vettel, of course, having that win taken away from him in Canada, eventually getting that win in Singapore, a very good win, actually. That undercut, that outlap was a superb outlap, which actually ended up getting in front of Leclerc, which I don't think it was meant to, and which ended up in giving him the win. And yeah, a very good race from him then, but we've just seen so many of those incidents that he's had. That spin in Italy, that was just should never have happened. He could have won that race had that not had happened as well. And also a little bit of bad luck as well, like in the qualifyings and starting from the back in Germany, his home Grand Prix. He could have won that race perhaps if he had a good qualifying. But now moving on to our top 3, and we've got Carlos Sainz in 3rd, and this guy's had an amazing season for McLaren, his first season at McLaren, and he deserves very much to be 3rd. At the start of the season, he was down in 12th. Didn't have the best of seasons at Renault last season. He was outperformed by Hülkenberg. Didn't really look too strong of a driver, but now he's almost looked like a top driver in his first season at McLaren. I think that McLaren lineup's going to be very good in the future between those two guys, Sainz and Norris. Of course, there's not really much I could say about Sainz. The TV cameras haven't really picked him up too much throughout the whole season, but Sainz, definitely a worthy driver of being up there, and could well be within a shout of podiums next season if McLaren can improve. But now, moving on to our top 2, which is going to be Verstappen in 2nd, who was 4th at the start of the season. Verstappen's had a hell of a season for Red Bull, and definitely been probably the best driver, the quickest driver, I think. Still a few mistakes here and there, like in Belgium when he'd sort of dive bombed into turn 1, and still a little bit hot-headed as well, but still losing a little bit of that here and there, and definitely becoming a more all-round driver than he was a few years ago when he was a bit erratic with his driving, but definitely one of the best drivers in the grid, and worthy of being 2nd place. Could well compete for the title next year if Red Bull can push on. Has really destroyed his teammates this season. And now moving on to number 1, which is Hamilton, who was 1st at the start of the season. He's 1st now, and there's not really much else you can say, but he's a 6-time world champion now, so really he deserves to be at number 1, and definitely probably the best driver still in the business. And what can you say? He's had the best car this season, but he's done the best possible job he can with it, so you can't really take that away from him. So a 6-time world champion now, and can he equal Schumacher next season? But that's what we'll find out. But that's going to be the end of the episode there, guys. I hope you enjoyed it today, and we'll see what else we're gonna do before the end of the year. A couple of videos got planned, so I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe. I'll see you very soon for the next couple of videos before the end of the year.